So you've probably tried everything, exposure, schedules, even feeding therapy, and maybe nothing's worked yet. But if that's the case, I want you to listen to today's episode because I could probably almost guarantee that there is something deeper going on. So here are going to be 4 hidden medical reasons why your child might be stuck in picky eating and what to ask your providers next, right? I'm going to give you a lot of information in this episode that will hopefully help you move your child forward finally, right? If you don't know me, I am Christine Miroddi Yoder, pediatric feeding therapist, holistic feeding therapist, and creator of the Unlocking Mealtimes method. And in today's episode, we are going to talk about the medical reasons behind food refusal, because feeding is not just behavioral, it is biological, right? So, a lot of parents think their kids are just being stubborn, but they're really just working on the wrong problems or the wrong issues. And you're not going to see progress working on the wrong issues, right? And these root causes are really way more common than you would think, right? So we are going to start with reason number 1. What do you think it could be? All right. This is the most common one I see that parents and providers often overlook. And this is usually just because of a lack of training. It's oral motor issues. This could be things like low tone, muscle weakness, tongue ties. Okay. We see this all the time. I would say probably 80% of the cases that we see, they have at least an oral motor component. Not that it's the sole issue, but it's a factor in why they're refusing some of the foods. Okay. And I'm going to explain why, right? Because if you can't chew food or move food around in your mouth effectively, they're not going to want to eat. It's pretty simple. It's exhausting. It's frustrating. It doesn't feel safe. It doesn't feel comfortable in their mouth. And often they can't explain why. And I'm going to give you a short story here. I had an adult who was a picky eater, and she really wanted to be healthier. She wasn't happy with the foods that she was eating, and she knew she was picky. She didn't know why. And when we did the evaluation, she had a lot of oral motor issues going on. And as an adult, she wasn't even able to explain why she didn't like certain foods. But after we did our oral motor work and her skills improved, it became easier for her to eat those foods. And it did finally click, like, wow, I didn't realize how hard that food was for me to eat before. So if an adult, a fully functioning normal adult, was struggling so much with that food refusal because of oral motor issues, how can we expect a small child to articulate that, right? They can't explain why. They're just going to reject it. They're just going to say no because they don't know what else to say. Okay. So don't be like, are you having trouble chewing it? And they're going to say no or whatever. And like, you might, I don't know if believing them is really the good choice there, because I don't think they can really explain and articulate exactly why. But here are some red flags that it is oral motor issues if you weren't maybe attuned to this before. Okay, so you're going to look for things like gagging and spitting out food. Not always. Sometimes it's just outright refusal. But if they are gagging and spitting out food, it is usually tied to this issue of oral motor. Pocketing food in their cheeks. Okay. We've had little chipmunks with balls of food just sitting there in their cheeks. Very unsafe. Also could be down lower, like between the gum line and the cheek. Okay. Preferring purees or crunchy, meltable solids. So think things that are puffs, puffs, like, it could be those little tiny puffs, or it could be like a Cheeto type of a puff where it just kind of melts in your mouth and you don't have to do much effort. Now, this is where I get a lot of parents that think that oral motor is fine because they see them chewing these types of foods with no problem. But the issue is those types of foods don't require much chewing at all. If they take maybe 2 to 3 bites tops, that would be a lot, because your saliva actually is breaking the food down more or less without their effort. If they were to just leave it in their mouth untouched, it would completely dissolve at some point. Okay, so that's something to note. Just because you see them chewing those crunchy foods, a lot of them just sort of melt down really fast, and it doesn't mean that they have great chewing skills. Okay. Also, if their meals are taking more than 45 minutes, right? Extended time, maybe because their chewing is much slower. Also, as far as tongue ties, a lot of times that gets missed if it's a posterior one. If it's a heart-shaped tongue, it's a lot easier for doctors to spot. But the harder ones for doctors to identify is the ones that are more posterior. That requires really just somebody with more specialized training to make that determination and diagnosis. But again, if the tongue doesn't have good range of motion in the mouth to move food around and gather that food cohesively, it kind of makes for an uncomfortable feed, right? So you're just going to be more likely to reject foods that are more fibrous, like vegetables and meats. Okay. So what do we do? You need a proper oral motor evaluation. Somebody that's going beyond just speech sounds. Somebody looking at the muscles and the tongue, the cheeks, the jaw during feeding. Who knows the names of those muscles? Who knows how to watch someone eat and identify which muscles are being impacted? Not everyone has that training. Certainly, dietitians don't have that training. Most OTs don't, unless they've taken a specialized course, which you would just have to ask them about. There's nothing on anyone's name or credentials that gives them some sort of, or gives parents some sort of an indication that this person is competent to assess this skill deficit. I mean, of course, we advertise that because we are trained in that, but it is really important to find somebody specific, not a general type of therapist, somebody who really focuses on this area in their practice, because it's not taught in schools. If they did not get any specialized training, all they're going to say is, oh, the structure and function looks normal, within normal limits. That's not the issue. Must be behavior. We get that a lot from even other speech pathologists sometimes. So very important to have that assessed properly by the proper person. Okay. Reason number 2, that this might be a hidden medical issue behind their picky eating, is breathing problems. Things like enlarged tonsils and adenoids. Very important. If a child cannot comfortably breathe through their nose, or if their tonsils are really enlarged, eating becomes, would I say a threat? It becomes a lot harder to eat because, okay, so here's what happens, right? Your body's number one priority is breathing. If you can't breathe, you die, obviously, right? We all know this. But your body is always going to prioritize your airway, not your appetite. That's not priority number 1. Breathing is priority number 1. Appetite and eating is actually not even priority number 2, but that's a different story. The point is, you have to be able to breathe through your nose comfortably to eat comfortably, because when you're chewing and swallowing, you can't breathe through your mouth. So if your child is some red flags. Mouth breathing. If they are a chronic mouth breather, they're probably going to struggle with eating because, again, they're basically having to choose between, do I eat or do I breathe? Do I eat or do I breathe? Right? And the contest is, you're never going to win that contest. Breathing's always going to win out. Okay. Other red flags: snoring, restless sleep, teeth grinding. Okay. Lots of things can cause teeth grinding, but if you also have these other red flags, it might be the teeth grinding in this case might be tied into this airway issue. Preferring soft, bland foods, again, because it doesn't require as much chewing, endurance, time in the mouth, etc. So it makes the mouth breathe quicker. And right, are you seeing the pattern here? Fatigue. They're probably going to have a lot of fatigue throughout the day. They might be very irritable, right? Because their mood is affected because of their poor sleep, because of their compromised airway. Only eating small amounts, liking to graze on foods all day. These are all red flags, red flags about breathing problems, enlarged tonsils. So what you're going to do is you're going to talk to an ENT or an airway focused dentist. Not all dentists are trained in airway. You want to go to one that specifically understands the airway. Many kids with picky eating are actually also dealing with obstructive sleep apnea or chronic mouth breathing, which is going to impact feeding and behavior. So by fixing the issue, we're actually going to be impacting their behavior, their sleep, and their eating. So a lot of times these things are all tied together. Okay. Very, very important and often very missed. Okay. But this is an important one that we often identify. Sometimes we're the first people to identify this for parents. Okay. Reason number 3 that this could be more of a deeper medical issue: the gut. This is quite an area, the gut. So this can be reflux, constipation, difficulty absorbing nutrients. If I can't stress enough that if there is a gut issue, all feeding therapy will be an uphill battle. You can have the best feeding therapist on the planet. It won't make a difference because the gut and discomfort is always going to override their appetite, right? Their body will shut down their appetite because if eating causes any sort of discomfort or pain, even low grade, they might instinctively avoid foods to protect themselves. And sometimes this happens very, very subconsciously. We've actually had children that ended up getting diagnosed with celiac who didn't really even have symptoms of celiac, but probably actually from birth had this issue their whole life and were never a good eater, but they've had feeding issues. So they weren't even saying or complaining about like, oh, my belly hurts, because if you think about it, to them, that's just how their belly's always felt. It's always been uncomfortable, right? So sometimes there's some cases that it's a little harder to diagnose than others because you might be saying, well, they might be pooping or they're going to the bathroom okay, or they never complain about their belly. But yet when we do gut testing, we do find that there is an issue. And when we do remove the thing that is the issue, they started to eat more because there was this hidden barrier preventing them from liking food because their body was trying to protect them in some way on a subconscious level. Okay, so here's some red flags. But again, sometimes it's a little bit harder to diagnose, but I'll tell you what to do with that just in a second. So red flags: bloating, gassiness, belly aches, of course, chronic constipation or reflux, extremely picky, even with food textures, loving processed snacks, carbs, A lot of our kids with gut issues tend to almost gravitate to those not so great foods for you. A lot of times they'll also accompany them with things like rashes or mood swings. Um, there could be, there could definitely be more. Some of our kids have had like severe, like vomiting episodes. Of course, there's other things that could be happening, but those are just some common ones. Other things could also be not gaining weight, even though they're eating a good amount of food. They might not be gaining weight, or they might have been failure to thrive at some point. So what are you going to do? Well, I'm happy to offer you our program, which our premium roadmap includes a gut health checkup, which is a stool test that goes to a lab, and our like holistic detox specialist Jennifer will look at all of the results of that and be able to tell you what's going on in their gut. Like, is there an issue with the bacteria in their gut? Are they digesting foods properly? Is there an enzyme issue? Are they able to absorb nutrients? Like, what is going on? Do they have markers for celiac or some other type of food sensitivity? There's lots of ways that gut testing can uncover things that even a GI doctor would have missed. So, we always would, if you want to cover all your bases, getting that gut testing done. We can dig deeper with these functional providers than a typical doctor can. They're really bound by those more black and white allergy tests. It's like, you're allergic or you're not. Okay. Well, that doesn't help, because if you're not allergic, but you're sensitive and you still shouldn't really be eating that food, and it doesn't come up on the test and you continue to eat that food, the problem will persist. So I like to be very thorough and do the testing, and rule out. Let's just rule it out. If that's an issue, we'll take care of it. And if it's not an issue, great. Awesome. One less thing to worry about. We'll focus on the other areas, right? Okay. So this will bring us to our next one: food sensitivities and allergies, which go hand in hand with the gut. But allergic or inflammatory responses, even small ones. So might not have an allergy, might be an inflammatory response to a food. It can make food feel unsafe for the body and your child's nervous system. They may not know why they're avoiding it, but their body remembers the reaction. On a subconscious level, the body does not forget, okay? It gets stored in the nervous system, essentially. Some red flags for this, and again, this is not a comprehensive list of red flags, but some things that you might want to look for. Red cheeks or ears after eating, okay? Rashes, eczema, any sort of histamine-like reactions after eating a food, which could be very tricky because sometimes you'll get this reaction and it might be hours or even days after they've eaten that food. These reactions are not always that like cause and effect obvious reactions, like I ate this peanut and then I had this reaction, right? Like a lot of people think of that anaphylactic reaction, like, oh, he ate a peanut and his throat started closing. That's a very obvious tie, but sometimes these ties are not quite as obvious, which makes it much more difficult to figure out and what to avoid. Okay. You also want to look for things like mucus in the stools or loose stools, diarrhea, meltdowns after meals, or, different mood swings or behavior swings after they eat. or just general strong aversions to certain categories of foods, what you want to do is get very curious when you see any of these. Of course, I think best practice is always keeping a food and behavior log. Elimination diets can help, but only really when done with some guidance. You want to avoid nutrient gaps. It's a little tricky though, because like I said, even with an elimination diet, you have to do it for a really long, at least for parents, a long period of time. It takes weeks. And then when you reintroduce it, it's sometimes more obvious, but it's really hard to say sometimes what is causing that inflammatory reaction. So that's why testing can be really helpful, because at least you're getting like an answer. It takes a lot of the guesswork of elimination diets and food diaries out of the equation. Definitely saves you some time and headaches with that. I find it's really hard to do that food diet, like elimination diet, because a lot of parents they're like, well, I don't even know if this is it. And it's like one of the only things they eat, and they don't want to take it out of the diet completely, So there's like all these other factors. It's not so easy to just say, well, I think you should just eliminate all gluten and all soy and all dairy and all this, and then just wait 6 weeks and add it back in. It's like, well, what are they going to eat for those 6 weeks if that was all of the foods that they had in their diet? Like, why are we just guessing? Okay, so it doesn't make a lot of sense for me to do that type of guesswork, especially with kids. I think it works better with adults who have more self-control and knowledge, or older kids that can handle something like that. I don't think it works as well for younger kids. That's my opinion. Okay, so I have a bonus for you. Number 5. I have an extra one because I couldn't leave this one out. But toxic load, additives, chemicals, environmental stress. Okay, in today's world, kids are navigating like a toxic soup that your systems, or our human systems, are never designed to handle. From the food they eat, to things they touch, to things you put on your skin, to the air you breathe, to the plastics and the toys they play with, the nervous system and their gut are just overwhelmed with completely synthetic inputs. Sometimes picky eating becomes a protective mechanism. Their body might be trying to avoid what it doesn't feel safe processing. Or it could actually be that the toxins are getting stored in their body and, making eating not as pleasant. So toxins can get stored in the gut, of course. And we know that there is absolutely a connection between certain things, right? So for example, we know that artificial dyes can result in hyperactivity and aggression in children, right? So a red flag might be, are they having meltdowns, or do they get really kind of crazy after they have candy or colored drinks? Skin issues like eczema, rashes, dark under eye circles, like they're called allergic shiners, those dark circles under their eyes. Do they chronically have that? Sensory overload. They might crash in classrooms, public spaces, or big holidays where there's just a lot going on. They might have a history of needing a lot of antibiotics, having chronic ear infections. And the sources of toxic load are just everywhere. It's in their food, things like red 40, which they are finally starting to take that out of food, at least in America. Yay. But there's other things too, like MSG, BHT, sodium benzoate. There's just a lot of ingredients that shouldn't be there that are, especially in America. In Europe, they have a lot more restrictions on what's allowed in food than we do. And it's just so unfair. But the tides are changing now. With RFK as Health and Human Services Secretary, we are seeing some progress. We are seeing some initiatives to take out some of these toxins from products. Even things like seed oils. We've known for a very long time that canola oil is not good for you, but even soy, anything highly processed is going to be an inflammation source for the body, especially soy oil or soybean oil, because those are heavily sprayed with pesticides, those soybeans. So you definitely want to avoid anything with soybean oil for sure. Plastics, right? How many of you have plastic water bottles, lunch boxes, food containers? I mean, certainly don't be heating those, but even without heating them, plastics leach chemicals. Aluminum exposure. I mean, aluminum can even come from personal care products. It can come from vaccines, medical procedures. I mean, aluminum, we know, is a neurotoxin to the brain. Even things like, and this is a common one, fluoride. Sometimes it's in the drinking water, it's in your toothpaste. And yeah, you're supposed to be spitting that out, but you're definitely not supposed to be drinking it. I'm not talking about the natural fluoride that occurs in nature. I'm talking about they added a toxic byproduct of a different chemical reaction. The leftover fluoride, they just dumped into the water. We know for a fact that it causes lower IQ. And yet there are still some parents and doctors giving babies vitamins with fluoride. I don't understand that at all. Things like synthetic fragrances, flame retardants, cleaning products, bleaches, these small exposures, you might think, oh, it's just a tiny bit. It's just a tiny bit here. They add up. And if your child is very sensitive or their detox pathways are not fully developed yet, or maybe their detox pathways are blocked, if they can't pass some of these things, and some of them can't, right? Aluminum passes the blood-brain barrier, for example, and it can get stuck inside the brain. And we know this. There's studies of children with severe autism. When they did autopsies, they found incredibly high amounts of aluminum in their brain. So clearly they weren't able to process that. This is I've actually taught in service classes to teachers about this topic, but it's hard because it's everywhere. But you want to start with some simple swaps. There's a lot of options now that you could swap. I'm not going to lie to you. I think the options are always more expensive. Maybe not 100% more. It's not like maybe everything is more expensive, but a lot of things tend to be more expensive that have less garbage in them, which I know, go figure. Using like real food, whole ingredients, things without preservatives, using stainless steel or glass for food and drink, choosing better oils like avocado, coconut oil, olive oil. You can try to support detox. Are they going to the bathroom? They should be going to the bathroom 3 to 5 times a day for healthy bowel movements. Some of our kids don't even go once a day. But you want to make sure that the body is constantly eliminating. Okay. There's sulfur-rich foods, which are really good to help eliminate in that process, like garlic, onions, broccoli even. You want ideally filtered water versus tap, air filters in your home, because products will off gas, like even things like carpets and couches and things like that might have those flame retardant chemicals. They off gas and go into the air. And if there isn't air circulation in your house, then you're just breathing that in, right? It is very overwhelming, because when you go down this path of living a low tox or no tox lifestyle, you realize very quickly how poisoned everything is, and it becomes very overwhelming. But at the same time, that knowledge is incredibly powerful, and taking one small step every time you need to replace something or run out of something, instead of just buying what you used to buy, finding an alternative. And there's lots of apps and websites that can help with this. The EWG Environmental Working Group rates products. There's also apps that rate products as well. One of them was Think Dirty. What was that other one I have? The Yuka app. So there's a lot of like shortcuts, so you don't have to spend hours and hours researching on your own. But this really does matter for feeding, because when kids are flooded with toxins, it changes how their body like responds to food and how food feels in their body. They might crave processed carbs and reject whole foods, right? Not because they're defiant, but because their nervous system is dysregulated and their gut is completely out of whack. So a toxic load just makes everything harder. Your body has to work harder to digest, to focus, to eat. Everything is harder. And unless you address these things, even the best feeding therapy might only get you so far, right? So I'm going to give you some questions you can ask at the doctor's office. So don't ask things like, is my child growing? Because that's always what we hear parents say, is that their pediatrician isn't concerned because they're growing. We want to say things like, could there be something going on in their gut, their airway, their sensory system that's making it hard to eat? Can you refer me to a provider who specializes in holistic feeding therapy? You want also to book an evaluation that looks at the whole picture. Most feeding evaluations are looking at the behavior. What foods do they eat? How far did they get with eating? They're not looking at their biology. At Foodology, we go way deeper. We assess oral motor skills, sensory sensitivities, gut health, airway, mindset. We create a personalized roadmap to uncover what's getting in the way of the eating. Number 3, I want you to consider gut testing. If food refusal seems tied to discomfort, especially, but even not, if you're really hitting brick walls and you're not understanding why, there isn't a clear reason, sometimes a really underlying small gut issue can be the culprit. Okay. So, through our premium roadmap package, we partner with a trusted functional medicine and detox practitioners who help families eliminate like the bad stuff from their gut, restore the gut microbiome, support detox pathways naturally, and give you the guidance and supplements that will actually make a difference. So you're not just in the dark ordering random supplements on Amazon. That's not going to be helpful. Because here's the truth, the body is absolutely designed to heal itself, but it can't do that when there are toxins overloading the system. You have to clear out the junk, and you'll be amazed at what the body and the brain are both capable of. Okay, so let's recap. Okay, the 5 hidden medical reasons your child's picky eating might not be behavioral, but biological. Number 1, oral motor issues. If they can't chew effectively, they won't want to eat, right? So our red flags: gagging, pocketing food, preferring only purees or crunchy mouthfuls. Number 2 reason that they might not be a behavioral picky eater, but biological issues: breathing problems or enlarged tonsils. If they can't breathe well, they can't eat well. Red flags are mouth breathing, snoring, grazing on food, fatigue, and a bland food preference. Okay. Reason number 3 that it might be a hidden medical issue: gut. Okay, like reflux, constipation, gut dysbiosis. If food is causing any kind of discomfort, it will be avoided. right? Red flags could be things like bloating, belly aches, carb addictions, rashes, and mood swings. Number 4, piggybacking on that, food sensitivities and allergies might be a hidden reason why your child is a picky eater. Even subtle reactions can make food feel unsafe. Red flags can be things like eczema, meltdowns after meals, diarrhea, strong aversions to certain food categories, right? These are all things to look at and very important to rule out. Okay, and our bonus, number 5 reason that your child's picky eating might be an underlying medical reason is a toxic load from additives and chemicals in their environment. Toxins can very quickly and easily overload the gut, nervous system, even the brain, and make feeding feel unsafe. Okay? Red flags include hyperactivity after snacks, rashes, those dark under eye circles, sensory overload, chronic congestion, and ear infections. Okay? Here's the truth. You can't fix a feeding issue treating the wrong problem. You got to know where the issues are. And when the root is medical, not behavioral, there's no sticker chart or exposure strategy that's going to move the needle. So if you don't know where your child is, take our quiz. Are they fearful, stuck, curious? And it will tell you what's the next stage. What support do they actually need to help move things forward? We hope to see you on the other side, and I really hope this episode was eye-opening and helpful for you. We'll see you next week.
Thank you for listening to How to Unpicky Your Picky Eater. To learn more about achieving your child's feeding goals, check out Christine's website at foodologyfeeding.com. And be sure to tune in next time to How to Unpicky Your Picky Eater.